email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Today's guest has dedicated her life's work to something that's often talked about in leadership but rarely practiced well, which is listening. Indi Young is a pioneering researcher, writer, and educator whose work has transformed how leaders, designers, and strategists approach empathy and human understanding. She's not just advocating for better communication, but teaching us how to develop cognitive empathy, how to understand people's deeper thinking, and how to let that understanding shape the way we design, lead, and collaborate. She's the author of 3 influential books that challenge us to go beyond the surface, beyond personas, beyond demographics, beyond assumptions, and tune into what drives people at their core. Indi is taught and consulted around the world to help teams apply deep listening as a tool for ethical design and inclusive leadership. In a world that moves fast and often rewards volume over depth, Indi reminds us that leadership starts with understanding, and understanding starts with listening. Indi, I'm really honored to have you with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Clint. I'm super happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you. And I guess in our pre-green room chat, there's a 4th book, I guess, coming, or it's on the horizon. You have a new one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if I survive.
They are, I think I've only written 2, but it's like you have to let them go because you want to refine them forever. So
This is true. Yeah. We are doing the Spanish translation of Time to Listen right now. It's already been translated into Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. And the group is so wildly brilliant. I can understand some Spanish, so I'm sitting in. And they're coming up with ideas. They're like, oh, wait, that makes more sense than what I wrote. So I'm going to my layout person, can we rewrite a little bit of this?
I like that. That's a good idea.
It's nice.
So I like to think of all the guests on my show as superheroes, and all superheroes have an origin story. So what's yours?
So I got my degree in computer science. I was a software developer, but I was really interested in the front end of things. And I was working Visa, not as an employee, as a contractor, subcontractor. I don't know. There was some manager, they had a call center. So this is back in the days when there were still traveler's checks. And they had a call center for when you lost those traveler's checks or your credit card. The credit cards were out. A lot of people, though, would take them on travel. And if you lost them, you had no way to pay for anything. So they would call the call center. And in the call center, there were all these reps. They're super, really detail-oriented. They want to make this person feel better because each and every person calling in was feeling a little vulnerable,
Sure.
Right? And they also interacted with each other, and they would keep track of like, oh yeah, you found a place to send the replacement traveler's checks in that tiny little village in Italy. Where did you send them? Right? Can you remind me? There was no Google Maps. They all had giant atlases, paper atlases at the end of every aisle of the cubicles farm. And they used green screens. So for those of you who don't know what green screens are, that was the kind of CRT or display that only had one color with the cathode ray tube like flashing it across the screen. And there were no windows. There was no mouse. Right. The rest of the world was moving on to windows and mice. I was actually there at the point where the rest of my team who were working at Visa, they got email for the first time, and they were all like,
this is going to be great. Only not to have that to be great. This is going to save us so much time.
There are ways to have it save time. People don't behave correctly around it. But anyway, I use the word correctly, and that's, of course, recognizing that there are multiple thinking styles around it. However, there can be rules. And one of the managers there is all like, no, we got to replace all the screens. We got to give those reps mice and windowed systems. And I thought, oh, they are not going to like this. Those reps are not going to like this. No one was thinking about the reps as people. Right. And so somehow, I don't know how, I was quite young, I begged my way to go out there and do some studies. I wanted to spend some time with the reps and understand what was going on, spend time with their supervisors, understand what was going on, took copious notes. I had to buy a suit to show up. I remember standing in the elevator, which was like mirrored, looking at myself, going in shock. Who is that? It was wild. Anyway, but when I came back, I was pulling all those notes together in a way that would represent what the reps were doing, trying to represent the broader set of things, not just the process, but those talking with each other about that little village in Italy, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't have any tools, so I used a state machine. Now, a state machine, for those of you who don't know, is something that represents like the pieces of how a software, the flow that a software goes through to get things done, okay? Earlier, it actually had more to do with the hardware and the state of the hardware. But this diagram was the only thing I had at my fingertips. And so I put all my notes into that. I built a bunch of diagrams that hooked together in various ways. Along the way, I had to figure out like, well, what data is getting passed back and forth? So I came up with a data schema and I presented it. The rest of the group, the contractor, the larger contractor, they had the systems group, they had the database group, they had the business rules group. And I present this to all of them and their jaws are on the floor and the database is like, you did the data schema? I'm like, well, I just had to do a little bit of it. Like, that's the major part of it. Like, okay, here it is. And then the software architects are all like, this totally makes our job easy. We can see this part there, that part there. We're done. Thank you. It was really awesome. So what I took out of that was that there's value there. There's value not only for the people that I'm trying to support, those reps who were not going to want a windowed system, so that I made sure that the windowed system could be used just with a keyboard, right? Mm-hmm. And so that they could get as fast and be able to get up and sort of talk with others and maybe file things that they learned in a central place so that other reps could get a hold of that. And that was the major part of my work. But the other part was like, oh, whoa, the rest of the business units here working on this project had value out of it. So it eventually evolved, because the state machine cannot tell you what needs to be known about humans, into something called a mental model skyline. And the mental model skyline is a way of representing people's cognition as they are intent upon a particular goal or purpose, even an intention. It can be something that they're going to see to the end, or it might be something that they're going to do all the time forever for the rest of their life. So what I do is I represent the interior cognition. And then that shows up as, looks like a bunch of towers in a city skyline. You've seen drawings of city skylines. That's what it looks like. And underneath each tower, we then align what solution or feature the organization already has in place to support that tower, like the foundations of that tower. And just the exercise of doing it that direction, like, opens people's eyes. There are all these opportunities and gaps where, oh, well, we designed that because it could be designed by tech, but nobody's thinking about it that way. We need to redo it.
Okay. What inspired you to write this latest book, Time to Listen?
That was the one question I'm like, how do I answer that? I don't remember what inspired me to do it. I guess, okay, so I have two books with a publisher called Rosenfeld Media, who's well known in the user experience world. And I had written a second draft or a second edition of the first book, but the publisher, it only had 4 paragraphs the same. And the publisher got angry with me and said, this is not a second edition, go away. And I'm left with this whole second book that I had written. I turned it into courses, online courses. This was when online courses were kind of starting up. I've always had my own platform for online courses because these courses are for people who want to learn how to understand people, who want to learn how to bring knowledge to our org so that we can support innovation, so that we can support strategy, like directing ourselves over the next 10 years, so that we can support this idea of recognizing missing audiences. And I made those courses sort of as a first round of converting that information. I then turned around with the help of an encouragement of a PhD up in Vancouver. She's all like, Indi, my PhD, or no, she was a postdoc. She was doing something about self-guided online learning. And she's all like, okay, let me help you convert. So I converted the Listening Deeply course. And as I was converting it, I'm like, this needs to be a book. One of the things, so it actually came out as a book first, and then I finished converting the course. One of my earlier books, I did the Audible version of it because I firmly believe that to understand information, people use different ways of understanding it. And so I want to give people different ways of understanding it. I want people to succeed. I don't want to publish a book to say I'm a published author. I'm trying to write a book so that people can succeed and take this farther. Yeah. So the book came first, and then the course is kind of like the Audible version. The book is actually usable. I mean, the course is actually usable without looking at the screen. You can look at the screen if you want to, but you could also fold the laundry and not look at the screen and learn just as well. So it's available for all different ways. In the courses, I also did captions. And this was before captions were being created. I hired somebody who was a transcriptionist, and then I hired another person who converted the transcripts into the captions. And that way you can actually participate if you don't have the ability to hear, or better yet, if you speak a different language. And English, may be your first language, but it helps to have the captions there. And if my goal is to give people more abilities, then I'm going to do it in every way I can.
No, that's great. I think it's a pet peeve of mine is that the transcription services, the automated ones I don't say they don't work, but boy, you got to go through them, and there's a lot of edits that have to be made. And then I've noticed the captions sometimes don't say what the person just said. They change what I'm like, okay, that's kind of the sort of the intent, but that's not what they said. So, it's gotten worse. It seems, when you speak into your phone, if you're like you're doing the dishes or something, you're like, oh, I got to get a hold of my friend to tell her about this time tomorrow morning that we're meeting, right? You speak into your phone and it converts you can see it convert it to a sentence and then change that sentence to something completely different that is more common according to the AI. Well, we're going to talk about that at the very end.
Okay, put a bookmark there.
I will. So you opened the book with a story about designing for averages in an airplane cockpit. And what is the story? Why is that story such a good introduction?
Oh, well, first of all, it's a good introduction because my dad is the pilot's pilot. So I had to include something that way. He is 95 and he's still building planes. Wow. Yeah. So this happened. This happened to sort of kick off the idea of physical design for universal bodies, right? So in the built environment, now that can mean cityscapes and buildings, or in the manufactured environment, that can mean like car seats, plane seats. It all started with the plane seats. Your car seat, when you get into it, you can tell somebody else has driven your car because the seat's in a different position, right? Yeah. So adjustable car seats didn't exist back then. My father also used to have all these 1920s cars, which are so durable. Oh, they do not fall apart, but their seats do not adjust. They are the military, I guess. They had, I guess, pioneered the idea of uniform sizes meaning we're not going to tailor make your uniform, I guess, unless you're a really fancy officer. But we're going to give you a size that sort of basically fits. And we've gone through and we've measured all these people and taken an average, and like that, we're going to make it small, medium, and large. And I don't think the extra large people came until later. After we got more sugar in our diet.
Yeah.
Which we all suffer from. But anyway, so they had the small, medium, large idea, and then they could create those uniforms in a more manufactured sort of way, a cheaper way, and it would still mostly fit people. That then segued to the plane, because the plane didn't have an adjustable seat. It didn't have the ability to get close enough to the yoke or the instrument panel. If you were especially tall or something, you would have to like hunch forward. Everybody who's a pilot has to have like 20/20 vision. So it wasn't because they were in need of glasses, but it was just body size differences. Someone who was a bit shorter, but a really great pilot, like how embarrassing to take your grandma cushion and put it in there. So they decided to try. I think they went through a bunch of other ideas, which didn't result in very good success. But when they got the idea of adjusting the seat and adjusting the yoke, then they were on to something. So that's kind of why, just that so many people, it seems, focus so much on the now. And our history is full of amazing thinking and amazing things that we have created, things that last, things that were created not with the idea of get it out there and get the most money for it, but created for, hey, I want to make sure that all the pilots that I have in my team, whatever you call a pilot team, you probably
it's called a squadron, but yeah.
Okay, there we go. A squadron can fly this thing as well as they can. They all have different skills, but those skills are being converted to the plane by use of different limbs, different arm lengths, right? Different leg lengths, different torso heights. So, yeah.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. You mentioned earlier deep listening. And so I noticed in reading the book, there's active listening and deep listening. And are they the same thing? And are they different, from what I call normal listening? How do you differentiate and define those terms?
Oh, yeah. So listening deeply is a type of active listening. Active listening it's also a type, it has many forebears. So it's also a child of non-directive interviews. Listening deeply is a very special way of listening. It's not something that you can do for very long. I can do it for about 2 hours and then I have to take a break. So it is something meant for being able to, for a short period of time, really get into understanding what another person's mind is like. I sometimes joke that, hey, if we had telepathy servers, we would be able to do this real time. But we have no telepathy servers, so we have to do this with a person's memories of what they thought, what their cognition was. There's a lot of different kind of forebears of this. So let me talk just about the idea of it being an active listening sort of thing. The point of listening deeply is to stay with that person, not to have a list of questions, which would be directive interviews. Its point is to be able to follow what a person brings up. So one of the rules about listening deeply is that you don't come to it with a question, a list of questions. You don't bring up topics. You come with some curiosity about something that person's been thinking about a lot. Okay. That means you can't I couldn't walk up to you and say, hey, I want to talk to you, Clint, about growing lilies, because you haven't done a lot of thinking about growing lilies, right?
Right.
So you've done some thinking about lilies in other respects, but not growing lilies. I would need to go find people who have done a lot of thinking about growing lilies and talk to them and find out what's been going through their minds. Now, if it's something that is habitual, like cooking dinner, you do it all the time, then we do something called a listening session first to kind of outline or get an understanding of that person's thinking and approach. And then we do it in person while they're cooking dinner. And we start filling in some of the blanks that they're like, yeah, no, I just do it so often that I can't even remember what to bring up. Right? So normally the things that I do listening sessions about are things like what went through your mind as you handled an accident that you were in, or what went through your mind as you changed your personal identity, or what went through your mind as you were trying to figure out which large enterprise software to buy. What went through your mind as you were trying to figure out which silicon or silicon-based elements to include in your manufacturing process? Okay. So there's been healthcare too. What went through your mind as you were handling these 3 chronic conditions that you have? So people will take us to what's important to them. We do not get to set that agenda. It's as if we're walking in. Each person has their own garden. Right. And in their garden of, this like selecting which silicon elements to include in our manufacturing process, one person's garden is going to be totally different than the other person's garden. We're standing at the garden gate saying, hey, I'd love to have a tour of your garden. And they get to take us on a tour of their garden. For some people that feel confined in a garden, I'm like, it's like favorite hiking trails. Like, here's the whole park that, the national park that you enjoy so many summers. Take me on a tour of it. What's important to you? You're not going to tell me about the lake that you never go to.
Right.
Right. Unless you're talking about avoiding crowds or something. Right. And I'm not going to ask about that lake, even though we might be walking right past it. It's not important to you. I'm interested in what's important to you, what's gone through your mind, and try to unpack that and sense what level we're at. There's a bunch more to this, but that's the basic sort of explanation of it. If you compare it to other types of interviews, it's very different. The question-based interview oftentimes is done as a poorly understood way. Like the team doesn't really understand. They want to understand what's going through people's minds, but they're like, okay, I'm going to write this survey, a set of questions, and then I'm going to have you say them out loud to this other person, and they're going to give you one answer at a time. In a listening session, the person is going to say, okay, growing lilies. Well, where do you want me to start? And I'll go, well, what just came up for you? And they'll go, oh, well, this dead bulb that I just found. I'm like, let's dive in there. Doesn't matter where we dive in, right?
Right.
We're going to try to cover the whole landscape, go through the whole garden, go through the whole national park, right? We're not going to get to everything. But as we go, the style of listening that I'm doing creates a safe space for that person. The style of listening and the way that I ask questions helps them understand that I'm really interested in what went through their mind, what inner thinking, what was like your little inner voice? What were the emotions? What were the reactions that you had, the emotional reactions? When you made that decision, what was the personal rule that you used to make that decision? And people start to recognize that's what I'm asking for. They start answering it and unfolding it for me without me having to ask about it. And at the end of these, very much so, people say, that was amazing. I have never felt so heard in my life. And then usually followed up by something about their spouse.
I couldn't help but as you were describing that, I almost had you in a white coat with a person on a couch. And how did that make you feel? You know, it's almost like you're a clinical psychologist.
Oh my God. Yeah. No, not at all. And I don't have a clinical psychology training. Also, I never asked, how did that make you feel?
Right. Your question is different.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind? But, but it's that same.
Yeah.
And that's how I heard it, you know?
Yeah. No, I've had clients, they send me like little cartoons with people on couches, and then they're like labeling it Indi.
Well, this may have answered another question I was going to ask later, but you talked about the longest you can do one of these sessions is a couple of hours. Mm-hmm. And in the book, you talk about deep listening as a heavy hat. Mm-hmm. Is that what you mean? Yeah,
that's what I mean. You can't do it. So in the product field, there's an understanding these days that research is simply doing 7 interviews or 8 interviews with people in one day, and then spending the next day coming up with the insights from the interviews. That is very tactical work. It has nothing to do with strategy. It's also very solution-oriented work. And you don't know how exhausted an interviewer is after trying to do 7 of these or 8 of these a day. Honestly, they're not able to keep all that in their mind. And so it becomes a spoken survey. That's the only way they can get through it. And, you may as well just go to AI and say, okay, tell me the results. And then I don't have to do all of this. And that's what's happening. Because literally that level of crap is coming out of those kinds of interviews. So what, when you do a listening session, there's a couple I need to get a little bit of explanation of what it is to explain why it's hard.
Okay, sure.
Okay. Yeah. And so what it is that you are only focusing on that person. All you're doing is listening to that person and imagining where they are and imagining the scenes. Or if you're not visual, you're, processing the words in a different way. All you're doing is paying attention. You are probably recording this, but if not, you are not taking notes. Hands free, no pen, right? If there's some point that they bring up and they're like going, and you're not going to interrupt them, you might jot down the word that you want to make sure we get back to unfold. But in the course of an hour, you're only going to maybe make 5 jots on a paper. Mm-hmm. So this is not about capturing stuff. So hopefully the recording is going, but if not, there's another way to capture it. It's not about capturing. It's about trying to build your cognitive empathy with this person, which means build your understanding of how they think and how they react and what their personal rules are. That takes all of your concentration. Now, as you're doing that, you need to build over time through practice these 2 processes in the background. So one of the processes in the background is judging, okay, is that person feeling safe? Are we going back into session mode too much? Or is that person able to stay in memory mode and unfold things for me? And I need to be sensing that all the time. It's just like a little process in the back of my head. There's another little process in the back of my head, which is, did we get to the center of this? Have we only been talking about explanations or preferences or opinions? Or did we get into the inner thinking and the emotional reactions and the personal rules? Did we touch on that for this topic? And there's going to be a bunch of topics. So put a bookmark there because I want to give people a visual on that. But going back to how hard it is when you are trying to hold a safe space for someone and really listen and show them that you're trying to get deeper and deeper, not out of an extraction point of view or an explorer point of view or anything that is kind of, colonial like that. What we're trying to do is form a team and build that person's confidence in explaining what went through their mind. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's hard. I only do one of them a day because
I can see why.
yeah, if I did a second one, I might misremember and try to ask a question about something that the first one told me. Oops.
I get that too, because when I do these interviews, I don't like to do two back to back because, I get the books confused and it's just, I'm like, let's just do one on Monday, one on Friday, or one a week, but I can't do them two back to back because it's too confusing for me. So
yeah, exactly.
So a couple of things you mentioned there, and I wasn't going to ask this, but you mentioned session mode and memory mode. So maybe I remember reading the book, memory mode was more about people living in their past and in that moment, if I recall correctly. And session mode is more of like kind of what you and I are having, where I'm asking questions. And is that correct? And is that a good?
That is a good,
Okay.
and the reason for that is that it's, for a lot of people, difficult to explain what your current thoughts are. It's easier to explain what your past thoughts were.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And so that's why we do that. But there are a lot of different ways around it. Some people are more visual than others. Some people find it easy to go in memory. Others don't. It would be better to have you ride along. Some people find it easy to explain verbally. Others would find it better to draw pictures along with explanations. Others would find it way better to interact via text message. So we'll do a listening session via text message over the course of a week or two.
Okay. I hadn't envisioned that. That's funny.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that it's a skill that takes practice. What are some of the biggest obstacles people face in developing this skill? And are there anything we can do to kind of jumpstart the process?
Yeah. Well, I don't think necessarily your audience is going to have the worst problem. The worst problem is that you have been a researcher in the other realm for so long that you don't want to let go of your list of questions. Right?
Right.
So I imagine with this audience, people are fairly okay about not having a list of questions. And they're fairly okay about like, let's just see what topics this person brings up. And we'll dive into each one of those and not try to bring up any topics artificially, right? I think the other problems are, it comes with practice. And that is knowing how to feel confident and how to feel encouraging in front of this other person. So for some people, there's this, I keep my interactions with people to a minimum because it's easier just to, talk about things that I understand, like process-oriented things or something. Talking about people and their emotional reactions is not something I need to get into. And there are a lot of people who believe that emotional reactions and personal rules have nothing to do with business. And I have done enough of these business things to ensure you that definitely, even when you are trying to figure out what silicon components to put into your manufacturing, there is emotion.
People get passionate about it for sure.
Yeah. Well, emotion could be frustration. Feeling frustrated, feeling annoyed, or feeling, hesitant, or even kind of like, I feel like I'm embarrassed, I want to hide that I thought that, or something like that. Those are all emotional reactions. It exists all the time. It actually runs business. Yeah.
Now, as I was reading the book, a couple of things jumped into my mind. One is I was going to ask you about how can I tell if I'm truly listening versus just waiting for a problem to be fixed, right, to show up? And I was reminded, I interviewed Dr. Allison Wood Brooks from Harvard, and she has this term, which I love, called boomer asking, which is basically asking you a question, not because I'm really interested in the answer, because I wanted to come back to me. So I might say, well, are you going on vacation this summer? And then they end up cutting you off because I really want to talk about what I'm going to do on vacation this summer, right? So
right.
How can I make sure that I'm truly practicing deep listening and not just trying to get to the next place?
Oh my gosh, this friend in college. Well, enough about me. What do you think about me?
That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, being able to recognize that you are in the beginning, I used to say that it's like this other person is like a deity that you're worshiping. They have this mind that you don't understand. And you want to kneel down in front of them, which is a really weird way of putting it, but it's kind of an interesting visual. You want to kneel down in front of them and say, hey, give me an understanding of your thinking. Give me what went through your mind, please. And let me try to do things to make you understand that I'm not trying to do something that will thwart you with the results of you telling me what's gone through your mind. So the idea, though, maybe the kneeling in front of somebody just doesn't work. I tried that in China and it did not work. So, I'm all about trying lots of different ways of conveying information. But the idea is that you're not really there. You're only there to help that person have someone to ask, the questions that I often ask are, because. I don't even ask it as an inflection, because. I say because, right? Another question I'll ask is, what went through your mind? A lot. Where did that come from? Right? Mm-hmm. So it sounds like there's more there. Right. Just these kinds of questions. I never say I. So even when you wrote that jot down, that one little thing that you wanted to make sure you came back to, there's a little end of that one topic. The person hasn't gone on to the next topic. And you're like, you could say, oh, I want to take us back to, right? In which case you're flipping them into session mode. Now we're back to we're in an interview and I'm taking you back. Instead, you can say, earlier you said, okay. I'm not there in that sentence. They're in that sentence. And we keep them in memory mode.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I think another one that kind of ties into that is the difference between listening and fixing. And I'm reminded early in my marriage where my wife was venting about something, and I'm an engineer, so I'm a problem solver. So I thought she was telling me about a problem she wanted to be fixed. And so I gave her some solutions, and she looked at me and says, I don't want you to solve the problem. I just want you to listen.
Yeah, exactly. That story exists everywhere. Yeah. Exactly. Unless you were a trained psychologist, maybe in that kind of a marriage, that wouldn't happen. But yeah, and I'm guilty of that too. I am not always listening. I'm not always a listener. I will find myself doing this when I'm just chatting with friends and I'm like, shut up, Indi. Right? Because I'm not always wearing that deep listening hat.
Right. Because it's so heavy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I do teach people how to do this when they're managers as well.
Okay.
And I've done this for several HR departments, trying to understand employees. And one of the things that we do is we also create thinking style. Like there's in one group, it was a group of employees working for an insurance company. And we found about 5 different thinking styles across all the listening sessions that we did. And so that means we can teach the managers what those 5 thinking styles are and let them sort of go, oh, I understand. It's not that Jonathan is this thinking style, because that would be a horoscope. Jonathan is a Libra. Let's leave that to horoscopes, right? No, Jonathan in this case is wearing this thinking style. And I can recognize that, and I can then support him in that thinking style in this case, right? So this idea of being able to help managers listen, there's a lot of power in that. A woman in Malaysia does this a lot. She teaches people how to coach and mentor folks. And one of the things that you can do is, when you're mentoring somebody, you're going to have regular meetings. When you are a manager of someone, you're going to have regular meetings. And in the US, you have this, I don't even know what it's called, employee rating systems. I don't know, something like that. Your reviews, your yearly reviews. 360
feedback is one that comes to mind. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a load of, anyway.
That's another podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But But one can also be having regular listening sessions, maybe even just 20-minute listening session with your employees one-on-one. You're never doing this in a group. No one will open up in a group.
Right.
So you're always doing this one-on-one. And each time you can review your notes from the last time. You take your notes after the listening session.
Right.
You make your notes in a certain format so that it can kind of let the information emerge. And I have ways of doing that. But the idea is that when you are tracking this and looking at those notes before the next listening session with that same employee, you're like, whoa, we're actually making some direction change here. And maybe that's really awesome. Or maybe the direction change is a little worrisome or something. And so you start a listening session with a germinal question. That's the only question you're allowed, question, subject matter question,
right?
Topic
Not how
question.
does it make you feel?
Yeah, exactly.
What are you thinking?
Yeah. And the idea with a germinal question is, let's say with Jonathan, I'm meeting with Jonathan again, and they have been moving more toward a different type of work. They've been spending more time with this different type of work than the project that they were assigned. And so I could say, hey, what's been going through your mind about the such and such, right? This new kind of work, because obviously they're spending more time on it. It's occupying their mind a lot. And I can understand then why it's occupying their mind a lot. I can then maybe see if they bring up the fact that they're not working on the other project as much, right? It's something that they've done a lot of thinking about. And that's where we go.
Well, that concludes part one of my conversation with Indi Young, researcher, writer, and educator known for her work on deep listening and human cognition. Coming up in part two of our discussion, Indi talks about the importance of seeing and considering the whole person, not just the one who shows up to work.
I have this image in the book. It's a big Asian dragon, long, lithe, sinuous body with kind of the big head with the tendrils and everything coming off of it. The head is where we focus. But that whole body is there, and that whole body is all the experiences that that person has had in their life. You can't cut the head off the dragon. It won't survive.
Right.
Okay. So at work, we're fully dragon. Our whole bodies are there. And to recognize that that's coming along with the face, which is our reality, our in the now kind of moment. It's that behavior, the words, the thinking, the decisions that they make are all being influenced by the rest of the body coming in.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.